Hey everybody, Brandon here, welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be covering game number 4 in my 7th tournament. I am recovering from a loss, however these games were spread out. There was one game per week, so I did have enough time to recuperate after my loss and missing that draw when I was in a drawing position. However, I did end up losing. Now I am playing against George with the white pieces, so let's see how the game progresses. I played e4, now we see c5, knight to f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and knight f6. So this is a normal Sicilian position. Knight c3 and a6, and I play bishop g5. So this is just mainline knight or theory so far, e6 and f4, and now my opponent makes a grave mistake. They played the move e5. Unfortunately, thematically, this does not make sense because you just played the move e6, and after f4, it is pretty much preventing e5. And either way, after e5 in this type of position, it's a little different from playing e5 already, especially even after a6, as e5, there might be some knight f5s. So the problem with e6, f4, and e5 here is that we can pretty much force a trade of queens. After takes, knight f3, and queen takes on d1. Although I have the weak pawn on e4, it's actually not as quite as weak as you might think. First off, there are mate threats, so that is a bit of a concern. And also, e5 is weak, so how do you defend e5? There's no bishop d6. Knight d7 is playable, however, it's a little scary here. Just because you might have to watch out for any knight to d5 moves. And overall, it seems that white has the advantage, even though we have this weak quotations e4 pawn, as e5 is actually appearing to be more weak than e4. Bishop g4, so now it defends against knight takes e5 because they're pinning our rook. However, we do have a nice response here, and that's bishop takes f6. The whole point of this move is after g takes, we ruin their structure, and now we have clear targets. With knight to d5, we are threatening knight c7 check, winning the whole rook, and we're threatening knight f6, winning the bishop. Now they were worried about knight f6 winning the bishop, so they took on f3. Now the problem here is knight c7 just barely doesn't really work because after taking, takes, I can get my knight out, but we just exchange 2 minor pieces and 2 rooks. So it's not really ideal. So I just took back, and now I'm still threatening knight c7 and also knight f6, threatening to win a pawn. Rook a7, knight takes f6, and with this type of initiative, it in reality should be winning. So do I win the game though? We see king e7, knight d5. This is just a nice move because if king to e6 here, then we have bishop to h3 check, where really their only move is f5 and then king f7, where we just win another pawn, as if they go king to d6, they're just walking into discoveries. However, in reality, maybe this is the best option, but this is just a very scary thing to allow, whether or not it's even possible. It's just not something that you'd want to play. Just worried about things like knight b6 and knight c8, for example. But okay, my opponent did not go for this and just went for king e8, saying, okay, fine, I'll just go back. If you want to play knight f6 again and go for repetition or something, fine. But again, with this type of initiative, I have great pieces. I should have a great advantage here. Rook to g1. I thought this would be a good move, just preventing any rook g8s. I don't want to allow any counterplay. Now we see bishop to e7, so trying to improve one of their pieces. I ignore it, I play bishop to h3. The thing is, I'm not really worried about bishop h4 check. I just play king to e2. I wasn't able to castle anyways, so this wasn't a concern in the position. But my opponent played knight c6, trying to get their pieces into the game. I decided to take on e7, which I think is okay. I think a better move might just be the immediate c3. The whole point is it just restricts this knight, and usually when you have a pawn or knight on c6, if you can play c3, or if there's a knight on b6, you want to play b3, and that knight has a lot less options because of it. However, knight takes e7, I decided to take the bishop for the knight, and I played c3 afterwards, restricting the knight, just like before. But now we see b5, and they're slowly unraveling. However, they cannot play rook to d7. I play king to e2, just connecting my rooks. h6, rook to d2. Now I'm trying to double up on this file, which would be great. If they played a nonsensical move like, for example, rook to f8, then rook to d1, and I have complete control of the file. And I might even have some threats of rook to d7 here. But okay. Rook to d2 and rook to d8. So they saw that idea, and they, of course, would not allow it. I decided to play rook g to d1. I think this is okay. Takes. I do have full control over the file, and it's hard to move the rook because I do have this check, and even though it might not be causing immediate issues, it's kind of a scary check to look at. For example, rook a8 does actually lose a little bit of material here after rook to d6, so unfortunately this is not possible, and if they move away rook to d6 anyways, they have to move their knight, and I win the h6 pawn, so that's the whole point. But okay, rook to c7, so they're just holding everything here. King to e3, just improving this piece. I think there's also a reason to play a3 here, just to prevent b4, and they'll have to play a5, but then I'll have rook to d5 to further target the pawn in their position. But okay, king e3, f6, and rook to g2. Now I'm trying to reroute my rook. They still don't have rook d7, so I can make this move, and it's not really hurting me at all. b4, and I go for rook g7, and I think objectively it's okay. It's not like the worst move in the position. I'm still up a pawn, and I'm trying to trade off rooks where it's just two minor pieces and I'm a pawn up, which I have reasonable chances to win. However, it also makes sense to keep rooks on the board because I'm trading this rook, which has control over two open files with ease, with a rook that can't even control one and has to defend the knight. So it also does make sense just to make some waiting moves even. For example, like I was saying, a3. We can just make any improvement we want here because in reality, what can black do in this type of position? I was a little scared of knight to a5, however, so this does play a role. But after knight c4 even, they might win the pawn. And this is just something I guess I just did not want to go into. And I can see why. Knight to a5 just does look like a scary move. However, maybe not a3 then. Maybe if I need to, then b3, where after knight a5, there's rook to d3. And c4 is defended, and c3 is defended. So there is no rook to or knight to c4. And of course, b4 first we can take it, but we can also consider pushing. I would say taking would be better because we do get to keep the pawn. But okay, rook to g2, and I trade off the rooks. It's a reasonable idea because we are just in a minor piece endgame, and if we can just trade off the minor pieces, it's winning. We're just up a pawn, and they have no tricks. So c takes b4. This is another move I'm not really sure about. It makes sense, but even maybe the immediate f4 is a little interesting as well because we can just kind of run up the board here and try to take. Of course, they can barely defend, but then we can start rerouting our bishop, and we can cause problems. However, okay, so king to c7, c takes b4, knight takes, and a3. Here, after knight c2, I was a little confused because I thought that the knight was going to have issues, but it really just doesn't because it always has d4. Here, this is actually still not a great move because it's kind of on the side of the board. And what I should have done is play king f2, where it's actually quite hard to defend h6. Instead, I ended up going for king to d2, which is also a very reasonable move. And the whole point of this is I'm trying to create a passed pawn and then use that passed pawn as a decoy to win these pawns, which is a winning idea. However, it does show to be a difficult conversion. Knight to d4, bishop to g4. Now everything is defended in my position, at least on this side of the board. I can always play h3 if I really need to defend. the h pawn, or even h4 h5, which is another interesting idea where it is defended. a5 and b4. So I decided to go for this immediately, and this isn't so great because after king c3 they have king to b5, and I can't really make too much progress here, even with a check. Actually, with a check it might be reasonable, but even then, if I make progress, then there's knight takes f3. So it's not so simple in this type of position, and it's not as clear as I'd want it to be. For example, h3. But okay. So I play king c3, but my opponent actually made a mistake with king c6. And now I can play king c4, and I kind of just get my king into the position without any real troubles. And I do have ideas of b5 in the position, where if I can time this correctly, for example, if they make a nonsense move, let's just say h5 doesn't blunder the pawn, b5 is possible, where after knight takes, there's bishop d7, king takes, and king takes. And unfortunately, in this position, we are just winning, because after, for example, king b6, king d6, then king b6, and we get the opposition here. And unfortunately, we should be winning. If they go here, then we have h4. But okay, so they weren't going to allow this. They played knight c2. They're just trying to give some checks. Of course, they can't really trade if they try knight e3 and then taking, because this is that would be king and pawn ending where I'm up a pawn. But they didn't go for that. b5 check, king to b6, and now is my chance. King d5, knight d4, king d6, king takes b5. I sacrifice the pawn, but it's not really a sacrifice if I calculated ahead, which I did. I just win the f6 pawn, and I win the h6 pawn because of it. Now this should be a pretty easy win. All you have to do is just push the h pawn. However, I thought, and I was seeing ghosts here, I thought I wasn't able to. I play king h5. Instead, just h4 makes a lot of sense. But even then, king h5 is fine. I am still winning here. Knight e2, king h4, knight d4, king g3, knight e2, king f2, and knight f4. And really, what I should have done is just played h4 here, control the g5 square. There's no entry squares, and I can just play h5 following up. And even if they somehow get to trade the bishop for the knight, this pawn is just way too far advanced on h5, where it will be winning. But I was scared. I play king e3, knight g2, king to d3, and now it's actually pretty much even here. King g5. And unfortunately, they get their king to f4, and there's not really much progress to be made. King g6, knight h4, king h5, knight takes f3, and unfortunately, in reality, this is a draw with king g5, and I push my pawn, they push their pawn, they promote at the same time, and unfortunately, there's no checks or anything to win in this position. So we agreed to a draw right here. Very unfortunate. I was actually very upset about this because I had what was clearly a winning position, whereas before in the last game that I lost, I had a slightly better position. It was tricky. This one should have been something that I should have won, and I was very frustrated, but I definitely did everything I could to improve my technique, and I made sure that stuff like this wouldn't happen again. And as some of you may know, if you watch my Twitch channel, I would say endgame conversion is one of the things that I have focused on quite a bit, and that is the one thing that I definitely excel at. But this is one of the reasons why, is because I was scared to have issues like this anymore, as it's very frustrating having very good positions and not being able to convert. So conversion is definitely key. It's definitely an important part of chess. You have to get your advantage, but after you get your advantage, you have to know how to win with it. As getting an advantage itself isn't enough if you don't know how to use it. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed game 4. Now I am 2 out of 4. I drew my first game, I won my next, I lost the third, and I drew this one. So that is 2 draws, 1 win, and 1 loss, which is 2 out of 4. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the final game of this tournament. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you then.